This is Indore city, the cleanest city in India. How are you?
I'm very much fine.
So enjoying in Indore. Okay, so
Thank
morning,
you.
good morning.
Morning. Enjoying going to our hotel for a business session. Thank you.
Okay. So what are we going to do today?
We are going to learn and experience God's presence.
Okay.
Thank you.
कहाँ से?
मैं देहरादून से
अच्छा
कैलाश धर्मशाला।
If
ओके
बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है
was
इंदौर
not
में
the
आके।
बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है ना?
this would be the capital.
ठीक है, हम लोग मिलेंगे
So
फिर।
the plan, but
कलिंगा हम लोग पहुंच गया है अभी देखेंगे।
So now we want to do something new. I want you to move on to places. Just smile to your friend in the aisles over there. Just say Jesus loves you. Alright? So when the person says Jesus loves you, we'll smile back at them. Oh, Jesus really loves them. So as we're singing this song, just go around, meet new people. Just speak of love over them. God's love over them. Alright? Every move I make in you.
Make me move, Jesus, every step.
Can you move out of your places? Would you meet this miracle?
Every step I take, I take in you. In my life, Jesus, every breath I breathe in you.
Oh, the ways of
Mercy, waves of grace. Everywhere I look.
Exodus chapter 33, verse 15 to 17. Exodus chapter 33, verse 15 to 17, it says, Then he said to him, If your presence does not go with us, do not bring us up from here. For how then will it be known that your people and I have found grace in your sight, except you go with us? So we shall be separate, your people and I, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth. So the Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have spoken. For you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. People of God, we are here, gathered here for a business meeting. And the little bit experience which I had, one of the best businessmen is our God, our Father. He knows how to do. He has brought the powerful principles which we all and all the big management institutes are using.
Pastor William, thank you so much. I want to first of all acknowledge the presence of God in our midst. The source of all wisdom, the source of what we know as the anointing. Not just for church service, it's for business, it's for life, it's for leadership in our family. And so I want you to think about that as we're going to hear a lot of principles from God's Word. But if you think that mission is contained in the church, you will have this barrier. So I want to suggest that there is another perspective that says the apostles are in your church. Not ordained by some denomination, they are placed inside of the church because God disperses when He calls people to go and make disciples. That's not the work of an organized church. That's the church of God released. Takes the power from kings and prophets and says now its anointing is not just on prophets and priests and kings, it's dispersed to all. You may have trouble receiving that, but receive it. Because apostles are people who start not only churches, but also businesses. Ooh, breaks my paradigm. Evangelists are those who are in the marketing. Prophetic people are people who can forecast the future. They see, they read the culture. Can we see like that? This man is a shepherd. If you just look at him as CEO, you'll see only a CEO. But I know him a little better. He's a shepherd to his congregation. So there is more perspective than what we read. That's all I'm saying. So allow the Spirit of God to speak to you, and don't separate business from sacred life. Wherever you go, life is sacred because you are the temple. You are the tabernacle walking around. You don't get the picture. You live a life that is without integrity during Monday through Saturday, and then come to the holy church on a Sunday. Never was God's plan. So I want to introduce Sam Thevanayagam, a friend, a partner in ministry. I serve with him, especially related to Micah Cricket Club. A way that we are seeing how to influence the cricketing world through principles from the game of cricket to enhance life and leadership. Even more, how to walk with God. And I want to say this, a big thank you to him, because somebody has to pay for this. I know that you came here as our guest, and I'm grateful that somebody wrote the cost and didn't charge you to receive this as a gift. So please receive this as a gift from him, and through the Lord, through him from the Lord. So Sam is married with 5 children. He has been an entrepreneur for the last couple of decades. God has taken him from here to somewhere at a place of influence. But the good thing about him, a lot of them are still on the track of without giving back. He wants to give back. Parts Life, Deval Life Systems, LC Engineering, 3 companies. He's the president and CEO, employs over 130 people. He's a defense contractor. I'll let him talk the rest. A cricket lover, which is also my connection with him. Congratulations, Sri Lanka, for amazing victory. Those of you who follow him.
Yes.
Beware of them. They're going to be a challenger for the World Cup. And so, Lord, we are here. We are here. We breathe because of you. We don't take that for granted. Today is a new day. Lord, we welcome these dear people from all around India. Taken their time, taken long journeys to be here. Maybe they are tired. Spirit of God, would you refresh? Would you once again breathe as we breathe in deeply, God? May our soul breathe. May our soul come alive this morning. And may we hear your voice, even through these principles. That we will become a little more human in a world that is becoming like machines. Interacting with computers, interacting with frames, interacting with screen. The screen age, Lord, we pray that it will infuse humanity back to us. Rehumanize us, Lord, so that we become people filled with love, compassion, gentleness, kindness, patience, forbearance, faithfulness, and self-control. To that end, use your servant this morning. Use all of us, Lord. Help us to ask bold questions, genuine questions where we need your wisdom. Holy Spirit, you're so welcome here. Welcome, sir.
I'm going to try to do this without a mic. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to try to do this without a mic. I was 13 years old. I'm known for playing cricket, but I was actually playing soccer as well. And we had a Tamil teacher. So I grew up in Sri Lanka, studied Tamil as my first language. So my medium of instruction was Tamil. There was this very short teacher who did not know how to pronounce the word front. He couldn't say front. So what we would do, the entire class, we would go sit in the back. And when he would walk in, he would say, come to the front, come to the front, come to the front. And we would all be sitting in the back because we wanted to hear him mispronounce the word front. He would say front, you know. We used to call him half soda. I didn't really have a good relationship with this guy. And so we had this huge classroom. So one day I decided to cut class. And I took a mango. You know, there are some mangoes that you can't eat. Right? The shape is like a mango, but you can't eat it. And I had a good arm because I also played cricket. I threw this mango through the window, and it almost hit him. I threw two of these mangoes, almost hit him. I left. He took roll that day. He was not my class teacher. He was only teaching Tamil. He took roll that day and he compared it with the roll in the morning, and I was the only student that wasn't in his class. So that was on a Monday. No, that was on a Friday. So he was waiting, I knew he would be waiting for me because the students told me, my classmates told me, this guy is waiting for you because he's going to get you on Monday. So I decided to cook up a plan. You know what, in Tamil we say kari manjal, which is turmeric. I put turmeric in the toilet bowl and I told my mother, Amma, I have a really bad stomach. So she said, you better not go to school. So she sent me, my father was in the army, she sent me to the doctor to make sure that my stomach was okay. So that was Monday. I also took rest of Tuesday. On Wednesday, I had to go to school because we were playing a soccer match. And if I didn't go to school, I couldn't actually play on the team. So I go to school. It was a Christian private school, very well-known boys' school in Sri Lanka. I go and I pray in the morning because I know I'm in trouble. I come out of the chapel and he's standing, and he takes me to the warden. So he goes there and he's standing there with me. The warden looks up and he says, you can go. He tells the teacher he can go. So I'm sitting there, he's finishing some work. His name was Patrick Gunawardana. He looks up. You know the first thing he asked me? He said, Tevanayaga, are we going to win the soccer match today? I said, sir, I will do my best. So I know that things are looking good. He says, why did you throw this? I said, sir, God promised I didn't do that. I said, so you can ask your brother who's in the army hospital. I was there last couple of days because I had a bad stomach. God promised, so I didn't do it. I had just come back from chapel. He said, you had to take some cuts. So he gave me 2 cuts, you know. I got whacked at the butt. And then he wrote in the paper that he gave me 4 cuts and that he's informing my father. You are looking for as well. Unlike Jesus, who already knew what was in other people's hearts, I am not a mind reader. Sometimes I have the gift of empathy. I can tell sometimes. But this is a large crowd, right? So I would just like for you to tell me one thing that you came expecting, so that as I speak, I can actually speak to it. So what I'm saying to you today is, the most important thing is that you recognize that I grew up in the island of Sri Lanka. I was 22 years old when I went to the US. I grew up with a father who was an army officer, right? So that's all I knew. As soon as the hair touched a certain point, I had to get it cut. One day he got mad with me because I had cut class or something like that. He says, go get a haircut. So I decided I have to teach my father a lesson. So I was about 16 years old. I went to the barber and I told him, shave my head. He said, sir, I can't do that. Your father will. I said, my father is not paying you. I am paying you. He shaved my head. I come home at 16 years old with a shaved head. My father did not know what to do. So I kind of grew up a little rebellious, a little naughty. At 18 years old, he said, son, stop wasting your time and my money. I'm going to send you to work. At 18, I became one of the youngest auctioneers in the Colombo auction. So part of the way I can speak loud, I can speak fast, is because I learned to speak loud and I learned to sell when I was 18 years old. Again, why do I tell you that? Because that's how I grew up. So I didn't really amount to a lot. In some ways, I was a disappointment. I was not living up to my full potential. Part of the reason why I'm here today and I do the things that I do is I want to be able to encourage and motivate and inspire people who are underdogs, who are not maybe living to their full potential. Maybe it's not their fault, right? But sometimes, you know, we go through certain seasons in our lives where we have wait periods. Somebody said it this way, it's like giving birth to a child. Now, I don't know what that feels like, but my wife did, right? My wife and I have 5 children. When you're pregnant, it's uncomfortable, it's uneasy, it's difficult to sleep, it's difficult to sit, you can't eat anything that you want, you have cravings, very difficult season. But somebody said, when the baby comes, all of that uncomfortableness, all of that waiting goes away, right? I see a mother speaking with the daughter right here, right? As soon as that child comes, right, all of that uncomfortableness is gone. So there may be some of you who are in that season of your life where you're waiting, a period of waiting, a period of pioneering, a period of speaking to things, and it hasn't, you're saying dry bones live again, and it isn't happening yet. So if you're in that situation, hold on, right? Because I'm here to encourage and motivate you, because there were so many times in my life where I have been through those periods. And so if you have been through that period, or if you're not in that period, there will come a time when you might have to go back into that period, right? To use the brigadier's example, he served as a brigadier in the Indian Army. Not an easy thing to do. Very distinguished service, probably 30 years, sir? 38 years, right? But you know, one of the most difficult things to do, because I saw my father do it, was to go from being in the uniform, where everybody stands up to you, to have to then go back into civils. 38 years, it's exactly what happened to my father. It was a very difficult time for an army officer, right? Because everybody stands up. The traffic comes to a stop, right? People will stop and let your staff car go through. After doing all of that, to be able to have to strip your uniform, it's not an easy thing to do. So there are seasons that God will actually take us through. But the beauty is that He's a God of every season, right? He's a God of every season. So why do I say that? Right? You might be in a certain season of your life, and you may already see God showing up. Or you may be in a season where you're waiting for God to show up. Be encouraged, because God will come through for us. And the reason He uses this time is to mature us, right? It's a time of maturity. It's a time of, it's the roots that have to go down in. And even though you may be a little older, you still have to go through those periods. I had a time when I was starting my company, and we'll get into that. In 2007, when I started my company, a very difficult time. 2007, 2008 was a very difficult time to start a company. And for 3 years, we absolutely struggled, my wife and I, and we had 4 children then. And then my wife got pregnant with our 5th. And it seemed like, God, why during this time, while we are going through this seems like a cruel joke. My wife didn't even want to tell her own family that she was pregnant. And I said to her, honey, this is not an illegitimate child. We are married. There's nothing wrong in me. But she was so overcome with grief because we didn't have enough money to be able to support 4 children. And God, in His wisdom, had given us a 5th. Right? We named her Savannah Faith. Her middle name is Faith because that is exactly what God was teaching us during that season. She's 14 years old right now. Amen. God gave her to us in a very difficult time in our life because the Bible says, the understanding of Jehovah Jireh is He knows what we need even before we ask. He knows the season. He knows the time. And He gave us a 5th mouth to feed because it's like Elijah, right? He said, put more water, right? Put more water and then see God do this work. So that's exactly what God did for us. He increased challenge by another 20% before He came through for us, right? So that's the God that we serve. So as I speak on entrepreneurship and as I speak on stewardship, I want you to understand that all of these principles, all of what I'm sharing, is God ordained, God given, right? Every experience. So we'll talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and stewardship. So what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? Okay, before we do that, so Pastor, if you will start, be the leader, tell me what one thing are you looking to get out of this seminar?
My name is William Andrews. We have a small baking kitchen, but we are in a phase where we want to make it big.
Yep.
So I'm expecting to learn some business principles which I can apply to my baking business.
Hey, you're not audible.
You can take the mic.
You cannot hear program. Go ahead. If you can make for here.
My name is William Manuel. We have a small baby kitchen, but we are in a phase when we plan to expand the business, have an outlet here in Indore, and for that I'm here expecting to receive some strong business biblical principles which I can go out and apply it in our business and make it grow.
Amen. You can just say your name and tell me your name and one thing you want to get out of today.
मेरा नाम वर्जिन डैनियल है। मैं जयपुर से यहाँ पर शिफ्ट हुई हूँ, 8 महीने हुए हैं। और मैं फ्रूट के अंदर मतलब मैं जयपुर में थी जब हमने बिजनेस शुरू करा था स्मॉल बिरयानी का, तो मैं यहाँ पर चाहती हूँ स्टार्ट करना, इसमें आगे बढ़ना, इसलिए मैं यहाँ पर आई।
Amen. Thank you.
Praise the Lord, everyone. My name is Jennifer Daniel, and I want to start my new business in music.
Unbelievable. Awesome.
So I am planning my new business is music in drum classes, guitar classes, and plus piano classes.
If I just came for her, I'll be happy.
This is Priyanka, and we are from Hyderabad. So I just recently left my job and definitely here to learn more strategies which will be applicable in the kingdom work as well as gaining integrity when we are in the marketplace. So
Yeah, my name is Praveen. Me and Priyanka, we do a lot of music and stuff, songwriting. So we're planning to do a music coaching business. So yeah, it's a good start for us.
Amen.
I'm Jasper from Shillong. I'm meeting like a different level of leadership, and I think that there'll be a takeaway for me too. Of course, like very much involved in some businesses. I believe that you will help me.
My name is Jerry. A lot of people know me as Brigadier, but I shy away from doing that because in civil life, as I see, things are very, very different. Well, ever since I retired 12 years ago, I'm trying to find ways and means how I can merge with the civilian life. I think I've done successfully in that, but there is a problem. Whichever I've done a couple of projects, and some of the projects I'm still on and into, and we find real hard times. Sometimes I have to go for marketing, and even the businesses and the projects are not doing very well. Sometimes we get bad partners, I can say. Sometimes I can say we don't have the strategy, and I, as perhaps a director, is failing to take it forward. So some of the problems are there with me, myself, and with my background. I really don't know what all may be the problems, but I'm here to understand more into how to take the businesses forward.
Thank you.
My name is Vanita, and I'm a vet actually, and I'm here with my husband Jasper. So, of course, like even me, we're not only dealing with technically with our veterinary works, but especially with the public relations, with the farmers, and especially the young vets who don't know how to go about, because things are very difficult and different with today's world. We are expected to do everything along with our work in the field and even with the administration. So I believe coming here will get us some things, because biblical principles are the same principles everywhere, and it will get us into the places where God, to be able to really use our potential in reaching the goals that God has given to us. And along with that, I too, with my husband, we used to discuss many things, especially dealing with the youth, especially, and guiding them and hearing out from them to be people who go along with everything that God has given us and holding on and going, really working in integrity, because the world is lacking a lot of integrity. And we used to discuss and say that, if a wise person with a lot of capabilities have integrity, it will be a very bad scene. But if a person who has just like very normal and not so much, but then if that person is a person of integrity, they can take things a long way. And I believe that what we're going to hear from Samti, like you have gone through a lot, and I believe that those things will be the principles we can take to our life works and life skills. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Pipa and I'm from Shillong. I'm a student, and whatever you teach today, like maybe I can use it because I'm applying for jobs and all. I can use, and everything that I do will be for His glory.
My name is Ashok Sharma. I am from northern western district of North India, Uttar Pradesh. I am a pioneer worker. I am also dealing with a business like jaggery. Sugar cane. So this my land is basically sugar cane land. There are a lot of jaggery being produced and sugar being produced from western district of northern India. And also we're learning to invest time in a musical industry. My son is a good musician, so he runs a tuition center to teach tuition to students. Okay, so there are 20 music learning students there, and we are helping them to also to learn more about music. Thank you.
Praise the Lord. My name is Kailash from Uttarakhand, Dehradun, and as you know, it is very hard place to Uttarakhand. We call Devbhumi, so very hard to share gospel. So praise God, yes, I came here to learn something, and how I can just share gospel through this MCC business. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Farzan, and I'm from Punjab. I'm still working with Pastor Jasper, and this is actually something new for me to learn about the business and with the ministry, because both are having the same aspect. And I'm also teaching guitar to many of the students in my place, and I have around 10 people, those who are learning guitar from me, so that will be very helpful for me to learn about the business, how I can grow and expand in the ministry.
We're going to talk about scaling. So, how to scale a business. Not scale in music, scale a business.
की मेरा नाम पास्टर थॉमस है, मैं फ्रॉम पंजाब तो है, और मैं मिनिस्ट्री के नाल जोड़ा है वो चाहना कि जोड़ा म्यूजिक है असली इस द्वारा जो बच्चों को सिखाया जाए। पंजाब के मैं थोड़ा जहा गा लेना, गॉस्पल सिंगर भी है। मैं प्रभु का धन्यवाद करता कि इस जगह सानू जो काम करने के लिए या बिजनेस करने के लिए सानू सिक्ख्या मिलनी है। प्रभु का शुक्र करते हैं।
His name is, I'll explain. His name is Pastor Thomas. He's from the same land, from Punjab, and he's also a gospel singer there. And he has something there, like classical techniques, how to just improve it. And he said, I'm very glad to be here, so I can learn some more about the skills that how I can grow in that ministry more.
Amen.
Hi, my name is Abhishek W. Vance. I had academy, music academy, and I'm unable to carry on because I am a civil engineer, I am a musician, I am a life coach. I help people like by my psychology, whatever I'm studying in psychology. So my dad's passion was engineering. He is from a government PWD, so he was from accounts department, so he saw engineers in a good positions. So that way, okay, my kid has to be an engineer. So that's why I am an engineer as well. But I do engineering work and everything. So when people ask me why these many things, I say God created me that way. So no judgments, so like that. So I want to learn something online where I can, manage my time.
So for those of you to whom making money or profit or cash is an issue, I want you to know, I grew up, my father was an army officer, my mother was a teacher, and profit was a bad word in our house. They did not understand profit. because they didn't appreciate prophet. My father was an honest army officer. There are a lot of dishonest army officers. My father was an honest man. My mother was a school teacher in a Christian school. So prophet was a very difficult subject. But I have to tell you that God prepared me. Just like this lady who wanted to go into ministry, I went to Oral Roberts University and I really felt the Holy Spirit on me very strong. And there were times when I was just starting to graduate, I said, God, whatever it is that you want for me, I want. To the point where my mother asked me, son, what are you going to do? I said, Amma, I think God is actually calling me into ministry. But I said, whatever God wants me to do, I am willing to do. So I was that willing vessel, and God didn't call me into full-time ministry, but He called me to ministry in the marketplace. Right? Because the truth of the matter is, there is no differentiation between what is secular and what is sacred. Right? So sometimes from pulpits, you will hear the differentiation. But the truth of the matter is, with Jesus, there is no differentiation between what is secular and what is sacred. Who created the secular? Who created the fisherman? Who created the farmer? Who created the carpenter? Right? I'm also encouraged by the amount of ladies that are here. Right? Because God made us both, men and women, in His image. Right? And we all have the ability to be able to dream and to be able to take on what He said. So we'll talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is to create, organize and manage an enterprise with considerable initiative and risk. My father and mother were working in places where there was not much risk. Yes, you get risk of getting shot, right? But really, every Saturday or every Friday or once a month, they got paid. As an entrepreneur, there is a lot of risk involved, right? And a steward is intentional and responsible planning and management of entrusted resources. I heard Pastor say that God was a businessman. I would say God is actually an entrepreneurship and a steward. You know why? He took what He had in His Son and He gave it so that He can get a return on His investment. Every one of us here and those that we influence are really going to be a return on His investment. Right? Because that's what an entrepreneur does. He takes scarce resources, he or she takes a scarce resource and plants it into the ground, expecting a harvest. Right? So what we are talking about is extremely biblical. Right? So I was speaking at a conference about 7-8 years ago, and I was wondering what I was going to speak on. It was supposed to be an entrepreneurship. And I was in a plane just looking outside, dazing, and the Lord said to me, entrepreneurship and stewardship are two sides of the same coin. That's what He told me. Entrepreneurship and stewardship are two sides of the same coin. As soon as He told me, I didn't understand it. I said, Lord, tell me that one more time. And He said, entrepreneurship and stewardship. So I actually created a coin that says that. So when I speak in the US, I give everybody a coin as a way for them to be able to understand, appreciate, remember that, especially when you're a Christian, right? This is a governor. Because if you're not careful as an entrepreneur, you think all of what you do is for yourself. I heard this brother say, I came here to get a connection between what is entrepreneurship and what is ministry. About 3 months ago, all of you know that Sri Lanka had a very bad situation. A lot of people starving, a lot of people struggling, and the Lord laid it on my heart to send $50,000 to pay for food so that we can be shipped from Bangalore to Colombo, and we didn't have the money. So I told my CFO, I want to send $50,000. He said, Sam, can we wait 1 or 2 weeks because I want to collect cash. I told him I'll put it on my credit card. He said, no, don't do that. I'll figure out a way to give you your $50,000. We sent that money about 3 months ago. And a lot of people, so it took a long time because of government bureaucracy. It took a long time for that food to get there. But you know what? People who are hungry, people who haven't eaten in days, are getting provision because of that. So do you see what I'm saying? When you are able to make money, right, God can actually use that money. I talk a lot about the fact about the man who owned the donkey that Jesus rode into Jerusalem. Everybody know that story, right? Think about that man. What was the condition of his heart? God had already done a work in his life. So that because Jesus did not, if you think about that story, Jesus did not go to him. He sent other people and said, the master has a need for it. Right? But what did this guy do as a steward? He says, go for it. So I talked on Sunday in Nepal, I talked about the fact that this person was willing to listen. This person was willing to learn. This person was willing to be flexible. Right? Because he could have had a plan for that donkey. Right? But no. The master needed it. He gave it. So can you see that God always has people out there? Because the truth of the matter is, God doesn't need these resources. But the people, the kingdom, the preachers, they need these resources. And so God has to do a work in our hearts so that not only are we entrepreneurs who are thinking in terms of profit, but we will understand stewardship, that we are thinking about this thing correctly. You know, a person called a guy who wrote Purpose-Driven Life, Rick Warren, says, life is a trust, life is a test, and life is a temporary assignment. It's a great way to think about stewardship. Life is a trust, life is a test, and life is a temporary assignment. So sometimes, even when we don't have, God is challenging us to give. Right? You go over and over again, right? In the story of Elijah, right? That widow didn't have much, but God showed up and wanted the little bit that she had, right? So you will see God challenging us with a test. So those of you right now who may have to go through some scarcity, if you're not careful, you might get a scarcity mentality. I have to tell you, in 2007 and 2008 and 2009, when things were very difficult, right, I was actually praying and saying, God, I want you to give me the heart of the man who owned the donkey. There are many Christians here. If we add all of your experience in Christian life, it's probably thousands of years. I am sure not one of you has actually prayed that prayer. But let me give that to you. To ask God to prepare your heart long before. So I didn't pray this prayer when I had resources. I prayed this prayer before I got these resources, saying, God, prepare my heart to be like that man who owned the donkey. So when you entrust me with resources, thank you. When you entrust me with resources, that I would be able to be a good steward. So God had already started preparing my heart. That's okay, Bachu, don't worry. We're good. I can sweat. I'm not like you, I don't need a towel. Just sit here and listen. That's more important. Right? God had already prepared my heart so that when the resources came, that He could entrust me with it. So that's a bonus. You know, start praying and asking God to prepare your hearts. Like the man who owned the donkey. So when God needs it, and he won't come, He won't show up Himself. He will send a servant and say, I need this. Are you able to freely give? So successful entrepreneurship developed by applying entrepreneurship recipe is very important, that we use the right ingredients. Right? So think about your favorite dish. Think about your favorite curry. Right? Think about your favorite dessert. Right? You need the right ingredients in the right time, in the right order. If you're not careful, somebody in marketing will say, we need a fantastic website, because that's what we need in order to be able to sell. But if your business does not come through a website, the primary way your business could come from could be word of mouth. Right? So if you go and invest in a website because everybody else is doing a website, that may not be the right thing to do. So it's very important to to think in terms of how are you getting that business? How is that work coming to you now so that you can actually think about that? But we'll talk a little bit more. Prep for entrepreneurship, you need people, places, and experiences, right? I used to say, about 10, 12 years ago when I was starting my company, I used to say, I'm going to fake it till I make it. Right? I used to say, I'm going to fake it till I make it. Today I've changed that slightly. I got some religion in me. I faith it till I make it. Right? Because the truth of the matter is, in the beginning, right, you need something. I'm actually, when I'm going to Chennai on Wednesday or Thursday, I'm actually going to see an electrical engineer who's just starting his company. I talked to him this morning and I said to him, I would like to come to your factory. The truth of the matter is, he doesn't have a factory yet. And he was ashamed to tell me that. He sent me the location to his home. But I called him and I said to him, listen, I know what it's like not to have a factory yet. I'm going to come anyway. I'm going to eat with you anyway because I want to spend time with you, encourage you. Then I called him and he was going to talk to the bank. I have to tell you a secret. When I was looking for money, I had more banks say no to me than girls when I was dating. I don't like banks. Today, every bank in America would love to do business with me when I don't need the money. But when I needed it, every single bank said no. So I actually wrote to him and I said, listen, I know you're going to talk to the bank. Here are the 4 things banks are going to be looking for. They're looking for collateral, they're looking for cash flow, they're looking for credit, and they're looking for your character. Right, brother? So part of your business could be actually helping other entrepreneurs to be able to figure out how to be bankable. It's one of the most difficult things for an entrepreneur to do, is to be bankable. So what I would do, because I'm a good talker, I would sit down and talk to the bank. I would massage the bank manager to see whether he would give me a loan. But guess what? There was no collateral. My credit had gone way down. My wife and I were actually living on credit cards. So guess what happened? The credit score came down. The collateral, we sold our house, put the money into the account so that we could spend it. But there was no collateral. We were running on fumes, right? So that could be a good business idea to actually do counseling for people who need to be bankable, so that you can actually counsel them and get a percentage or have the banks help you to be able to do that. So there is this difficulty, there is this, but I'm here to tell you that as you persevere, as you push through, and don't let this obstacle stand in your way, things will happen. Successful entrepreneurs are willing to take risks. I'm sure every one of you here has a risk tolerance, right? But to be an entrepreneur, you can't be like my mother and my father. My mother and father, they didn't have high risk tolerance, right? They worked for the government. They liked the idea of getting paid and having, no turbulences. They were not bad people. They are the ones who taught me the values that I can stand in here today, the integrity and all of that, right? But you need to take risks. You need to be able to execute on your ideas. I'm telling you folks, telling you friends, brothers and sisters, that your mouth is extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful because your words are powerful. Amen. Right? If you think about God, when He spoke, things happen. Right? I have to tell you that I not only talk, but then I actually go and I write it down. I am like an architect. I am not an engineer. Sometimes I come across like an engineer. My degree is in sales and marketing. In fact, when I did a test, I got one of the lowest scores for a technical course. So brother, I appreciate everything that you've studied in engineering. I am not an engineer, but I have learned through a lot of difficulty to sound like an engineer. But what I'm saying to you is, it's extremely important for us So to be able to execute on ideas and to be able to write it down, right? So you call it a strategic plan, you call it a one-day plan, 1 month plan. You have to write it down. It's exactly what I did. I took a very complex issue and I actually drew a flow diagram and I said, this is the way I'm going to solve the military's problem. They had obsolescence problems. Obsolescence meaning they couldn't find parts for all their aircrafts. India is going through that right now because India gets a lot of their parts from Russia. I spent the night with the diplomat 2 nights ago and he was telling me that the Indian Air Force is having a lot of issues in being able to get parts because a lot of their aircrafts are Russian aircrafts, and because of the war in Russia there are a lot of supply chain issues, right? So you can imagine, because Russia is struggling to fight the war, they don't have time to be able to figure out how to be able to supply parts to India. So what I did, I created a plan. And I said, I color-coded it, and I said, this is exactly how I'm going to solve your problem. I put down a recipe, and I went to the military, and I said, this is what I got. Eventually, they started to fund it. They started funding a little bit, and a little bit more. It's like the kingdom of God, right? It's like many of you are pioneers here, right? I talked to quite a few who are pioneers. When you first go and preach in a place, you get hundreds of people showing up. No, one person. Sometimes you're talking to the wall. You're talking to the waiter in the room. You wait because nobody came, right? But that is all part of that process, right? But the important thing is to speak, and the important thing is to write it down. Because as you do that, things will happen. Start with what you have, right? If you are somebody who's a musician, God is not going to call you to become a doctor or a farmer or somebody like that. If God has actually prepared you for 38 years to work in the Indian military, He's not going to now call you to do something completely different. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because Ephesians 2:10 says, we are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which He has prepared in advance for us to do. Does that make sense? Right? So start with what you have. And if you go back to the Bible, right? Whether it's Abraham, whether it is David, whether it is Moses, God told Moses, what do you have in your hand? So my question to you today is, what do you have in your hand? And sister, I want to encourage you that sometimes you have to think a little bit more. Think a little deeper about that. I'm going to tell you a story. I went to court to buy a company out of bankruptcy. The other side had much more money. They had much more influence. They had been working on buying this business for a lot longer. I was brand new to this process. And I thought to myself, God, what do I have that differentiates me from everybody else? So this other party, they were going to buy the company, they were going to close it in the city, and they were going to move it somewhere else. I had about 7 or 8 people who did not speak English. They were Vietnamese. And so what I did, I told my team, I want these 7 people to come to court and sit with me by the judge. And when it was my turn to testify, and so not only did they come, I made sure that I planned a meal for them. There was about 25 people on my side. When it was time for food, I planned it in such a way that I planned to make sure that I had food for the American people that I had got, but I also made sure that I got some Vietnamese hoagies for the people who were Vietnamese people. When it was my turn to speak, I told the judge, I said, Judge, I want you to know that I bought everybody lunch today. But I want you to know one more thing, that these 7 people, I made sure that they had the type of food that they enjoy, right? And I said to her, I said to this lady judge, I said, my father taught me, if you focus on the little things, the big things will take care of themselves. You know, in 3 days, after a lot of going back and forth, she gave me the company. A big reason was I showed empathy. And I didn't bring big people to the party. I brought 7 people and I said, listen, if this people buy this company, they are going to actually take it away. But if you give me this company, like Moses, I'm going to entrust. If you entrust me with this, I'm going to take care of these people. And this is the way I plan on doing it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So start with what you have. It's an important. So my question to you is, and let it continue to be an open folder in your computer. You know how sometimes when you don't close your folder, it goes like that, right? I want that to be in your mind. Start asking the Lord, because I'm not going to be able to tell you what you have, but you need to say, in your 38 years of experience in the military, what is it that God has given you that you can actually now apply? Like that boy who brought the 5 fish and the 5 bread and the 2 fish to God. This is what I have in my hand. I'm going to give it to you. You're going to take it. You're going to bless it, and you're going to multiply it, not so that I can be fed, but many can be fed. Right? That's stewardship. It's starting with what you have. So before I go further, any questions with regard to that? Starting with what you have. It's a very important principle. It's a scriptural principle. So for me, I had actually learned in the automotive business how to do small volume. Usually the automotive volumes in the US are very, very large. But I worked for a remanufacturer where the cores, we were getting the old parts back to remanufacture. So when I had to buy something, I couldn't buy high volume of something. So when I came to Nashik or Pune or Chennai or Hyderabad to do business, I had to tell them, listen, my volumes are not very high. We have to figure out a way to be able to make small volume and to be able to do it so that you can make money and that is profitable to us as well. So God had used the automotive business to prepare me not to do large volume, because the truth of the matter is, it doesn't take a lot of brains to do thousands and boatloads of something. Chinese do that every single day. It's more difficult to do small and medium volumes. But God had actually taught me. And so when I started to run my own business, I said, God, what is it that I have? I realized God had actually given me a model of how to make small volumes and make it profitable. Right? And so that is exactly what I used to be able to launch my business. So we'll talk about leftovers. Do you know, as I travel, that every culture has this idea of putting rice with something and binding. If you go back to before we had fridges, right? Think about it, right? Your grandmother, your great-grandmother, right? They didn't necessarily have a fridge. So they had to use the leftovers. How did they use it? They put it all the same pan. Put rice and put some eggs, some masala, and it became biryani. It became fried rice. It became, paella. It became gumbo. Every single culture has that. It's a good example of starting with what you have, about using what you have, about being a good steward. Because your great-grandmother or great-grandfather would have never thrown food, am I right? They used what they had. And so that is what I'm saying in entrepreneurship. Right? So for those of you, quite a few who are in music, right? God is not going to call you from music into something to be a veterinarian or a farmer or a banker. No. He's going to, where you are. But you have to be creative with it. Think about what is that niche? How is that specialization? What is the market need? How am I going to think about it correctly? So you're going to need some discernment. So this is teamwork, right? Because you are not asking me, but you're asking the Holy Spirit, God, the Creator, God, show me what this difference is. Just like how I did. When I asked these Vietnamese people to come, my leadership team thought I was crazy. Because they're like, why would you take these people? They're the least. The judge is not going to be happy, or they're not going to be impressed with who you're bringing. But that's exactly who I took, because I had a plan. I said, this is how I'm going to actually teach her that I was a better steward. And do you know, that was a big part. You won't believe that after the thing was over, she actually came down from her chambers to talk to me. And she had some of her law students come to hear me testify on the last day. And they said, we heard so much about you, right, that we wanted to meet you. And I'll tell you another funny story that happened. That they had the other side testify, they did a fantastic job, told a lot of lies and everything else. Then the lawyer, he was a very well-educated lawyer, asked me my name. I told him how to pronounce it, Sam Devanayagam. He puts me on the stand and he butchers my name. Most Americans do. So then after a while, now the momentum is starting to shift. Right here I am, up here, getting ready to speak. My whole family is here. People are there to be with me. And he says, he murmurs my name and he says, can you pronounce your name? So I said, my name is Sam Devanayagam, but if you're having a hard time with it, just call me handsome. The whole court just erupted just like you did. And the lady was a lady judge. She had such a crush on me. My wife was sitting in the front row. She had such a crush on me. It was unbelievable. And from that time, when she referred to me as Handsome Sam. So if you go to the federal court now in Philadelphia and you take the transcripts, they talk about Handsome Sam. So talk about starting with what you have, right? I had a long last name, right? This person butchered it. But rather than be a victim, I turned it around. I go there googling, and then what the hell to do? So if you look at people like Abraham, Moses, right, even a guy like Barack Obama, I don't like Barack Obama's politics, but on the other hand, he's an excellent, eloquent speaker, right? These are people, if you think about it, I tell a funny story. When Barack Obama was running for president, he had put out a book, something about the visions of his father, something like that. I didn't have any money at that time. So I went to the library and I put my name down. I was the 14th person to get the book. I got it and I read it, first 2 chapters. After 2 chapters, I realized this guy is a empty suit, doesn't really have anything of substance, but he knew how to speak, right? And I can be very honest with you, he's not a good administrator, he's not very creative, doesn't have a whole lot going for him, but he can speak, right? So the important thing here is not Barack Obama, but every one of you, God has created, the Bible says you're his workmanship. He has created you with something special. I don't need to be like Suresh. Suresh has got a PhD, right? I don't have to try to become like him to be successful. You know why? Because God has created us with unique abilities, with unique opportunities, unique failures even, to be able to teach us, right? So those are the structures of people. Number 2. Creativity before capital. Most people you talk to will tell you or will think that the way to be successful in business is that you need money. A lot of you, if you are going to be honest, you are waiting for capital in order to start your business. I'm not saying that capital is not important, I'm going to come back to that. But the most important thing is an idea. I had one of my mentors used to tell me, Sam, this is not a money problem, this is an idea problem, right? You need the right idea. You look at whether it's Bezos or Elon Musk or any of these people, they didn't start with money. They started with an idea. So I would challenge you, those of you, in fact, if you don't have money, that's a good thing. You know why? Because when you have money, you cannot think beyond that money. And I'm going to give you an example of that. About 10 years ago, I had gone to hear ambassador for Kenya speak. And this is before Kenya got oil. And Israel is in the same place. Israel and Kenya, if you go back 10 years, Kenya found oil recently. There is no oil in Israel. There wasn't any oil in Kenya. So guess what? They had to actually think about how they were going to do do well in economy differently. While places like Saudi Arabia and Oman and Doha, what do? They have oil. So everything that they think about is through oil. Does that make sense? So it's very important for us. Like when I started my company in 2007, my wife and I had a fairly big house. I even had an office in that house. Right? I had a home office. 2007, it was ready to start the business. I said to my wife, honey, we're going to start the business. She said, yes, we are going to do that, but we're going to sell this house. I said, no, we won't. God is big. He can handle me having this house and starting the business. We went back and forth. There was a lot of tussle. Husbands and wives, you will see, right? During this time, there's a lot of turmoil. I'm not going to hide this. There's a lot of, issues that are going back and forth, especially when there are insecurities, right? Women sometimes can get more emotional. Security is the most important thing for them. And we were going back and forth, and she said, honey, we have to sell the house. I sold the house, put that money bought a smaller house, and put the extra money into the business. So for about 3 or 4 years, I struggled with this idea of, God, why did we have to sell the house? It was really bothering me. My wife said, why are you talking about this all the time? It's a house. Let it go. I said, no, honey. I know it's just a house, but I want to understand God. Because before we bought that house, I had prayed, and God had actually directed to the house. So why 3 years later do I have to sell this house? When we had our 5th child, my sons were playing baseball in 2 different fields. I was going from one field to the other field, and I'm taking my youngest daughter in a prayer. And I had asked God this many times. He did not answer, but this time he did. He said, it's about the office. I said, Lord, what about the office? What about the office? He said, if you try to have started your company from that house, everything you would have thought about was through that office. But I had much more planned for you than a home-based business. There's nothing wrong with the home-based business, but God was asking me to think outside. Because otherwise every little thing would have been trying to maximize this home office. And that's not what God had for me. So as soon as He told me this, even though my business hadn't turned around, I started to cry. You know why? Because I knew that the business that He had in mind for me was larger in scale than I had even thought of. Right? So sometimes it's important for us not to think about money first. Think idea first. Once the idea comes, get that started. Write it down. Pray over it. Speak into it. Talk to your friends and other people about what it is that you're planning on doing, right? Especially people you trust, right? Because as you articulate it, right, that vision becomes clear, right? It's very important to do. Think through what is required, study all options, don't resort to cash immediately. People will come and tell you need a website. Right? How many times have you heard that? In order to have a successful company, you need a website. Brother, when you do your guitar business, those of you, people will tell you, because that's what they know. They're going to tell you stuff that they know, but it's important for you to have the right idea. Number 3 is create. This is a very important part of being a steward. Right? You have to create something. Right? Create something that is a unique product or service, right? That the customer needs or wants now and in the near future. Another way to say it is you must have empathy. You must listen to what the market needs, right? So I told you got to start with what you have, right? But you can't force that into the marketplace. You still need to have empathy, like I did today, right? I didn't start speaking because I got the stage. I wanted to listen and hear from you as to what you came from. Because otherwise, I'm coming here and I'm telling you what I want to talk about. Right? And that's not the answer. Because we are not living in socialism or communism, where it's supply side. The market dictates who is going to be successful, right? So it's extremely important that when you're creating, and again, right, those of us who are Christians, those of you who have the Spirit living in us, right, this is something that will come automatically. It's like water will flow. But we have to be open and we have to ask God to show us. Start with what you have, creativity before capital. And as Christians, the Bible says we have the mind of Christ. Right? So I'm not talking a foreign language to you. I'm talking to you in a language that you understand. So envision what the market requires, start with what you have, make incremental improvements. The thing is not to try to go for perfection, right? We do something called prototyping, right? So when you're making a curry, sometimes the first time you make the curry, it may not taste right. So the first time you make it, you don't want to make it for a lot of people, right? You want to try something small, right? You want to start with a little bit, keep changing the ingredients slightly until you get what you want, right? So it's important to have a good idea and then to be able to execute on that idea, to test it out, to make sure this is exactly the right thing and where your head is right. So once you create something, this is one of the most fun parts. I told you that when I was a young boy, I was very good at finding nicknames for people. Right? I used to call this guy Half Soda, I used to call somebody else, Tundu Valandan, Shivering Tokke, all the time. I was very good at coming up with names. I have to tell you, in 2007 when I started Parts Life, I couldn't come up with a unique name. I tried, I prayed really hard. I said, God, the only name that I could find was this name called Parts Life. I had gone to visit a company in Germany that was a public company. It wasn't a for-profit company. The EU had created this thing called Parts Life, and they were actually working with the OEMs to be able to lobby to the EU. This name never left me. So I said to myself, okay, I'm disappointed. I can come up with all of these nicknames, I can be funny, I can do all of these things, but when it's time for me to name my own company, I'm stuck. I'm not going to wait for it. I'm going to call it Parts Life, register the company. Later on, if I have to change, I can go back and change. So I call it Parts Life Inc. because Parts Life domain name was already taken. So I call it Parts Life Inc. and I went further. Do you know that God actually gave me the name before He gave me the problem to solve? So when I started trying to do work in automotive, things were very difficult in automotive. 2008 was a very difficult time for automotive companies. They didn't want to buy anything. In fact, I was trying to work with Krishna Maruti Gurugram on a project with the Jeep Chrysler. They got millions of dollars of orders, over $200 million worth of orders to provide seats. But after a year and a half, Chrysler could not get the money to be able to buy the parts that they were looking to buy from Krishna Maruti. It was that difficult of a time, even for big companies, to be able to get cash. So what I did, I said, God, I know that you have given me this ability to make small things well. Automotive business, no door is opening. I need to pivot into something else. And just then I found out that the US military had a lot of issues with obsolescence. So that's how I ended up with working with the Department of Defense, right? Because the automotive sector was completely broke at that time. So what am I telling you? That God had actually helped me with this name, Parts Life, long before I went and talked to people and said, you know what, I can extend your customers' expensive and mission-critical assets by making parts for you and that kind of stuff. What a better name than Parts Life as a way to be able to describe what I was doing. So the name that you want to create is very important. I think yesterday during the service, we were talking about being chosen, we were talking about Jacob, right, Pastor? Right, Jacob's name, how he had changed his name from Israel to something else. Jacob to Israel, right? So even in Christianity, even in God, right, the name is very important. So how you come up with that name it's actually going to occupy the domain in people's minds. So don't come up with a name that is difficult to remember. It needs to be something, right? It needs to be something that, I'm going to give you an example of it. It's important to think about positioning, both legal and small business. So those of you who are going to register a company, right, you need to think about these things really well. Because if you don't think about it right, later on, you will have issues with things like the domain name, Mr. Website over there, right? It's important that you work with your customers even in thinking about their names correctly. So when you're a website developer, don't just develop a website, teach them about positioning strategies and branding, because now you're actually not just a website developer, you're actually helping your customer think through the right things, what they need to be thinking about. You can say, here are the 7 things you have to think about before you come to a website, right? Because now you're not just telling them, hey, I heard you're starting a business, I'd like to do your website. No, you're actually providing them value by saying, here are the 6 or 7 things to think about before you start thinking about your website, right? It's a way of creating value for somebody. So think it through what business is and what it will become, right? So by God's grace, God had already given His name, and I didn't realize what it was going to become. I thought I was going to run, I had a nice office. I have to tell you, it was custom built, cupboards and everything else. So this is one of the reasons why I didn't want to leave the office. I had a 3-car garage. I had my brother help me, and we put a lot of shelves. I thought, being a good steward, I was going to use the garage as my warehouse. I had an office, a fax machine, everything set ready to go. But God asked me to sell that house because He had much more. The scale was going to be bigger. So even before it happened, when He gave me this revelation, I started to cry because I realized, you know what? God had something bigger planned. He was not allowing me to think small. So in 2010, when my wife found the house, and she said, we are looking to buy this house, I didn't even go into the house. We went up the driveway. As soon as I saw the driveway, I knew this is going to be a next house. It had some things there that I had been looking for in the earlier house. You know what I'm saying? So for me, my wife, it was about the house. For me, it was about understanding that. I needed to understand why He wanted me to do this, and then He wanted me to do that. I wanted to understand. And it took a while. So people, those of you who are in the valley right now, those of you who are thinking through what that idea looks like, right? Even though it takes time, it will come. Let me say that one more time. It could take time, but it will come. So many questions that I had, when I asked the Lord, why do I have to sell this house? He didn't tell me right away. It took about 2.5 years for Him to answer that question. But I didn't let that go. I wanted to know. Because I wanted to understand that. My wife thought, Sam is still thinking about this house. He's like, Lot's wife keeps looking back. No, I wanted to understand God. Right? When God told me this, even before the provision came, I said, Lord, You are amazing. You're going to do amazing things, because I suddenly realized if He didn't want a home-based business, that this thing was going to blow up. You have to shape, right? So before we do that, let me give you one more. There was an example here. In our neighborhood, there was a few people that opened up. They started a business serving breakfast. They call this business Breakfast Nook. Breakfast Nook. Good name, awesome name. But guess what? After they started getting crowded for breakfast, they went to adding lunch and then adding dinner. Right? With a name like Breakfast Nook, it's very difficult for somebody to find you for lunch and dinner. Am I saying that correctly? So this is the danger of thinking too small, right? You have to think for today, but you also have to think a little ahead to seeing what God wants you to do, what territory He wants you to occupy, right? And in every case, think bigger, because we serve a big God, right? And as long as we are willing, He is willing to be able to scale that, and we'll talk about that. Shape. It's very important for us to shape something, shape the idea, right? So, if you think about concrete, right? Before you pour concrete, what do? You create boundaries, right? Are you with me? Right? You put boundaries so that when you pour the concrete doesn't go everywhere. It goes exactly where you want it to go. Am I saying that correctly? I use this word shape very, very often because it's very important to be able to shape what it is that you're looking to do. Because if you don't shape it, another way to say it is, another better word for it probably is the word define. So after you have empathy, it's like if you go back to something called design thinking, they say have empathy first, right? Rather, then it talks about definition, right? That's what I'm talking about here. Like you are saying what it is that you're going to do, and you're also saying what it is that you're not going to do, right? Very early in my business, I had to decide. God had actually closed the door in the automotive business. There were many opportunities as the market turned for me to go back into automotive, right? But I had to discipline myself and say, that is not where God is taking me. Because all of the resources, all of the types of engineers, all of the certifications that I needed were actually taking me to the military force. So for me to now start to go back to automotive would have not been the right answer. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't shape the idea. You have to, some people say start with the end in mind. Good way to think about it. Think about how things are going to look. Those of you who are starting a home-based business, right? Many of you who are who are musicians, right? I am not poo-pooing the idea of a home-based business. Please do not misunderstand. What I'm saying though, is you have to think about what happens when your class size grows. How are you going to serve them? And I would encourage you to actually be thinking a little bit about that as you are doing your home-based business. And for you especially, rather because you are thinking in terms of how do you scale without you being in the middle of that, right? I heard you. That's a big part of what you're trying to do. How do I scale without me being the one? It's like being a doctor, right? Even if you're a heart surgeon, right? You can only do so many heart surgeries a day. So you can create value when you're a heart surgeon. But when you're not being a heart surgeon, you can't go on like I did. I can't come to India and Nepal for 2 weeks because that means there is no revenue creation, right? So you have to think about that. So you have to apply creativity to that thing and say, God, give me a model that keeps me from having to be the center of this thing the whole time. Let me build it in such a way that eventually I don't have to be the person in the middle of it. So I don't have an answer for you yet, but as you think about it, those answers will come. Am I thinking, even for you, right? For those of you who are, so I am not saying don't start a home-based business. My business started at home. But my wife said, this house is too big for us, it's too much to take care of, and you know what? Those of you who are married, you have to listen to your spouse as well. But I have to tell you that when it came in close to 2010, when we were really struggling and things were still not working out, she said to me, honey, I think I'm going to take our children and go to my mother's house until things change for you. And I said to her, hon, that's not what I want you to do. But if you must, go for it. I'm going to stay here because this is where God put me. And until things turn around, I'm going to occupy until God shows up. So yes, it's important to listen to your spouse, but there are certain times it's important for us to know, what is more important than listening to your spouses, listening to God, and I just felt like I needed to stay here. Because I couldn't necessarily tell her everything that I was seeing, because I also didn't want to increase her anticipation that things, because I didn't know when things were going to happen. I knew things were going to happen. You may be in that situation. There was a time I won a very large purchase order with the customer. I went to see them. They eventually told me the funding was taken out. Talk about government contracting, brother. One of you was in government contracting. It was a $12 million contract that I won over 5 years. I went to see the contracting officer. The contracting officer said, we don't have any more money and we're not going to go forward with this contract. I was so disappointed and so discouraged. I said to the contracting officer, it was a lady, I said, what is it that you would want me to go home and tell my wife? I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and driven 3.5 hours to go see this lady, and she's telling me now all of a sudden, this thing is not there. These things have happened to me. The reason I'm sharing that is I want you to understand that's part of the experience. Sometimes, I told you that life is a test. How am I going to handle this test? What was I going to go home and tell my wife? I had to continue to talk faith, continue to talk to her and tell her I had nothing in my hands, but I had to tell her, honey, things are going to happen. The reason I'm saying that to you is some of you might be in that situation. So I want to encourage you. I'm standing here as somebody that it has happened to, and I have been able to prevail by God's grace, and God did come through. So shape is very important. So it's important to know your product or your service really well. Right? My mother used to say, my team doesn't like when I say this. My mother used to say, know it like the dirt under your fingernails. What was she saying? I need to really understand. Because you cannot sell something that you don't know about. Right? So we must have discernment. Brigadier, when you are choosing partners, right, we need to have discernment to know whether these people have the ability to be able to do what it is that you're planning on entrusting them. Right? Because sometimes they will come with big resumes. They will come saying, they are also trying to fake it till they make it. Right? But it's my responsibility. So this guy from Chennai, I didn't discount him because he didn't have a factory to visit. You see what I'm saying? Because I was there once. There was a time when was my garage, and I was running a business out of my home. Because he said to me, Sam, you can come to my house. And I said, brother, I don't need to, he's not a believer, he's a Hindu. I said, I don't need to come to your house, you come to see me. Right? I'm going to spend some time with you, I'm going to speak life into you. Because God has given me an opportunity to be light and salt. Does that look like evangelism? Does that look like increasing the kingdom of God? Does that look like being able to speak life into a non-believer? Right? Who's in a place where he's probably in a new season of his life. He is just like me, after working for a company many years, he's trying to take that and he's trying to parlay it into something. Right? Very difficult season to go through. Talking about evangelism, it's the right time to be able to speak life into that person. Right? I actually called and prayed with him. When I finished praying, he said, Sam, we have never met, but I'm almost ready to cry. And I wanted to tell him, when God works, that's where it is. In Nepal, 2 days ago when I was speaking, I had met somebody on LinkedIn. He actually came to see me. He used to be in Afghanistan, lost his job. He came to see me. Another Hindu. He actually sat next to me and heard me speak. He came because he thinks that because I'm a defense contractor, I might be able to get him networked into his next opportunity. The ability to influence the kingdom of God as an entrepreneur is huge. So for those of you who are thinking about saying, God, you didn't call me into full-time ministry, He actually called you into full-time ministry. I have like 130 people working for me. Gives me, I along with 4 children, the 130, It also includes 4 of my children. But I have to tell you, I told the judge, I'm going to run a meritocracy. Meaning, if my children are successful and they deserve it, they will have an ability to own this company someday. But if they are not, then there is no way that I'm going to make them part of it. They have a job until they mess up. And it's my job. You know, a great way to disciple somebody is to work with them. How do you think Jesus got discipled? Think about that. By showing up every day. Right? And doing the mundane things is how Jesus was discipled to then do 3 years of ministry. So, for those of you who are in between these places of saying, God, you know, like you saying, hey, do I do this? Do I go into full-time ministry or do I do this? Your full-time ministry could be in business. I'm not saying that we don't need full-time ministers, but more and more and more, right, God is looking for people, like Brother Ram said, you know, he brought up what Billy Graham said, that the next move of God will be in the marketplace. And I can tell you that that is truly my story. It's truly my testimony. Because I am able to shape, I'm able to teach, I'm able to help these guys buy their first house. Right? And be able to become good dads and good moms. So there are people who are Burmese who don't speak English, that we teach them English. We teach them finance for non-financial managers. I'm pouring into them because you know what? These are God's other children. And the way that I'm going to please God and I'm going to worship God is by serving His other children. And as I'm taking care of their physical and emotional and spiritual needs, because I'm not only helping them with their spiritual needs, I'm also helping them with their physical and their mental needs by giving them work, by paying them a good salary, by talking to them about, hey, what is your next step? What is the next skill that you want to learn so that you can continue to grow and continue to do that. So it's extremely important to understand your customers. You don't have to spend too much of time, but you have to ask a lot of good questions. Right? The important thing is to ask questions. Right? Where do they live? What does their day look like? How are they measured? What motivates them? Those of you who are getting into the food business, right? How much time do they have? So how can I make things convenient for them? Right? How much discretionary income do they have? Right? What do I mean by discretionary income? Right? Income that they don't have to spend on their rent, they don't have to spend on their house, right? Things that are already spoken for. Because if they don't have a lot of discretionary income, if you come up with products and services that are high market, they may not be able to afford it. For those of you who are in services, right, you're planning on doing things like guitar lessons and voice lessons and different things like that, you have to understand this. Right? Is there one person working? Is there two people working? What is a convenient time for the student? Not necessarily based on what is convenient for you, but what is convenient for the student. So you have to understand your customer. There is something called the 5 why example, right? It's asking why 5 times, right? Because when you ask why 5 times, you get to root cause. Those of you who are in the photography business, right? Your business is extremely seasonal, right? It's built around occasions, right? It's built around weddings, it's built around parties, right? So it's built around events. Understanding that, right? And asking why 5 times. Why are they buying? Why did they come to me? Or why are they going to somebody else? And getting a good definition is extremely important. You have to know your pricing and your cost. So yes, you need to know your customers. It's also important to understand your cost. So that we talked a little bit about, somebody's talked here about, I need to know how to make profit. Right? In order to know how to make profit, you need to know what your costs are. Not only the cost of that material, but now logistics costs have gone right up. Right, with freight, air freight, sea freight, land freight, all of these things are escalating. So it's very important to be able to capture your costs so that you will know exactly what something is going to cost you. Because without that, you can't think about making profit. And know your stakeholders, your partners, right? So this is where we need God's discernment, right? Because a lot of people are going to come to you, business ideas and all types of ideas. It's very important for you to be discerning. Sometimes you have to go visit these people. You have to invest time up front before you get involved in a transaction as to who these people are, what is their background, what is their pedigree, right? Because this guy I'm having breakfast with, I see potential for him being a supplier to us, for him being a strategic partner for us. So even though he doesn't have a factory, that didn't deter me. I still want to find out what type of person he is. I'm going to be in Chennai already. I'm going to spend some time to get to know this person, because guess what? I'm getting involved with them up front. And there's a possibility that I could be a source of his capital. I don't know that yet. Think about it. When I was talking to him this morning, I thought, man, if this guy is a good steward, right, some of his capital could come from me, because there might be some things that he can do that my company needs. And what better way than is it to deal with an engineering outfit in India to be able to do this work for us, right? So it's important to know these things. We talked a little bit about, brother, you talked about supply chain logistics and stuff like that. It's very important when you're doing something to have good quality, right? And so I don't want to get too much into this, but how you define quality is important. What is the standard of quality? So where I come from, the standard of quality is 0 defects. Right? So even though you may not achieve 0 defects right now, you must have a standard, right? It's like, as Christians, what is our standard? To be like Pastor William? No, it's to be like Christ. But am I like Christ today? Far from it. But is the standard Christ? Yes. So the same thing is true as you get into business, right? It's extremely important to do it right the first time. Whether it's documentation, so for me, not only in my business, not only do I want product quality, I also want information quality. And you know the important thing is, because I defined it this way, do you know now the military is actually paying me for information as well. I'm doing reverse engineering and I'm providing them a drawing and they're paying me for the drawing. Then they pay me to do a prototype, and then they pay me for doing testing. Then they pay me for actually launching the product. But it started off by me saying, I am going to make sure that I am thinking about this thing correctly. I'm not going to be short-sighted. Some people will make sure the product is good, right? But all of the other processes, just let it go. Let's keep correcting it. Right? But every time you correct something, there's cost involved. So when you start something, it's very important to think about these things correctly. Right? I had a situation where one of the ladies who works for me, she sent a check to a wrong place. And I found out about it, and we recut the check. I asked her, how are we going to make sure this won't happen again? Right? So we corrected the problem, but I asked her, how are we going to prevent this from happening again? She said, I'm just going to do it better the next time. But I said, no, Melody. What are we going to do? Because I already knew the answer. I said to her, we're not going to write any more checks without putting the address on the check, number one. Right? We're not just going to write Suresh Thomas without putting the address. We're going to write Suresh Thomas's address in the check. We're going to print it. And secondly, we're going to use those envelopes that are see-through envelopes where you can see the address. Right? For 3 cents more, we can go ahead, brother.
Your voice is very low. Can you repeat it again?
Yes, sorry.
Colonine.
So,
colonine.
in my office, they sent the check to the wrong place. When I found out, we corrected the mistake. But I asked the lady, I said, what are we going to do the next time? And she said, I'm going to be more careful. I said, that's not the answer. I want a way to be able to prevent this from happening ever again. And so the answer was to print the name and the address on the check and then use those envelopes that you can actually see through. In banking, they use that, right? So this way, you will never have a check go to the wrong place because you're putting the address and the name one time and you have to, you understand? I was able, with one small improvement, correct it forever. That problem will never happen in my company again because we took care of it. But it's going back to thinking about quality correctly. And me saying, we're going to define quality properly. And what I was saying earlier, Pastor, was the fact that I not only make sure that the product is right, I also make sure that the information is right. So whether it is a drawing, whether it is an invoice, whether it is a bill, whether it is a check, whatever leaves our office has to be 100% right all the time. That's the standard. Again, I said, my job is not to become like Pastor William. My job is to become like Christ. Right? That's the standard. So we can have high standards and really start to work without compromise to achieve those standards. Am I saying that correctly? Okay. And doing it right the first time. So whether it is ministry, whatever you are doing, thinking about it correctly, thinking slightly ahead. You know, in South Asia, we are very good about being adaptive. We know how to adapt very well, right? And this is a quality that God has given us, no doubt about it. But sometimes that can actually work to our disadvantage. Because you know why? We are just willing to just do everything the last minute. I'm just going to think about it, I'm going to change everything the last minute because as long as it passes this time, I'm okay. And while that is a good habit to have quick feet, right? If you're a sportsman or an athlete, you want to have quick feet, important, right? But what is more important is to think about this for the long term. That's why the Japanese do it so well. There's a lot of Indian companies that have learned quality from the Japanese, especially those who are in automotive. Either they learn from people like Krishna Maruti, they work with Suzuki, all types of tie-ups. Either the Koreans or Indians have done a very good job with quality. So I'm preaching to the choir, but I want to make sure that we understand it here, because that's who I'm talking to right now, that you are thinking about quality for the long term. When you start something, start it right. Think about it, shape it, plan it, create it, do it right the first time, because now we are building a system that's scalable. Because the truth of the matter is, you will always be in the middle of this process if you don't. Because now you're inspecting everything, and inspection doesn't improve quality, a good process does. A good process improves quality. When you inspect something and you depend on inspection, you cannot improve quality by doing that. Okay, we're almost done, 3 more to go. Fail fast. Right? It's very important that when you have an idea, that you have to try it and learn from it. Right? Don't hold on to that idea and wait for a long time, because you are not going to learn anything if you do that. But on the other hand, if you try something, you write it down, you try it, right? You're learning to fail, you're learning to see whether your plan, whether your initial idea is working, right? This is very important to do. So when you have an idea, try something, do something about it. It's almost like doing a prototype, right? You're doing a prototype test, you're doing it one time, learning from it. Once you learn how to do it the first time, then you can move on. Monetize. We are getting to cash. It's very important in a business to be able to get to cash. This is one thing that my parents did not understand. They were not comfortable talking about money.
And many of us may be in that way. We're not comfortable talking about money. But it's very important to be able to get to cash. Sometimes people go out and get a lot of inventory before they have a plan on how to sell it. Right? Because if you do that, you are going to, the important thing of cash, now you're holding on to goods, and you don't have the cash to pay people, to pay suppliers on time, to pay salaries. So it's extremely important to get to cash. And one of my founders told me, the guy that I used to work for, he said, money doesn't talk, it screams. Right? Because talk is cheap. I can talk all I want. But if you eventually, like, if we all eat here and say something nice and we try to leave, they will call the police. We have to show up in cash. Right? So getting to cash is very important, and it's something that you have to think about very early in the process. Then you have to be prepared to lose it all. Right? I was thinking about that scripture this morning where the Bible talks about the fact that, this person, he found this land, right? He sold everything to be able to buy that land, right? Here was somebody, that's entrepreneurship. You have to be willing to lose it all. But as long as you are careful, and as long as you are thinking about it correctly, your heart is in the right place, you've done all the hard work, right? God is not going to let us down, right? He's going to come through for us. But it's just important to think about these things correctly. And then you have to keep your word. When I started my company in 2007 through 2010, there was like 3 suppliers. I owed about $25,000. So 3 separately, total was about $25,000. It took me like 3 years to pay them. Every time they called me, I took their call. I told them I don't have the money right now, and I will eventually pay. Eventually, I paid all 3 suppliers. It took a long time, but I paid them. And I said to them, do you want me to pay you interest? Every one of them said, Sam, we don't want interest. We want to have a continued relationship with you. We talked about the fact that life is a trust, is a test, and a temporary assignment. If you're not somebody who can keep your word, people will not be willing to take you seriously. Right? So these people knew that I was a man of integrity. But I am telling you, I did not have the money to pay for my own mortgage, to pay for my own medical insurance. So certainly I didn't have money to pay them. But I didn't make that an excuse. Even though I didn't go back into the automotive business, and all of these 3 suppliers were in automotive, and they were of very little future value to me, I still made sure I paid them because it was a test and a trust and a temporary assignment. So it's important to think about that correctly. Scale, baby, scale. There's quite a few who talked about how do you scale, right? Pastor, that was one of your questions. It's important to recognize that when you are doing something for, let's say we are having a party for 10 people and we are cooking, right? That is very different to cooking for 10 people versus cooking for 100 people. The constraints are going to show up in some other places. And so it's very important for you, if you don't have experience, to be able to talk to somebody who's already been there and done that. Right? To say, hey, I'm planning on doing this, I'm planning on scaling. What are some things to think about? Because the truth of the matter is we don't know everything. But scaling is eventually important, and that's why I told you quality is important. That's why I told you product and service is important, because once you know that and you start to scale, there was a lady in my church, she was making cupcakes. She was making cupcakes at home and selling it. Pastor, very similar to maybe like what you are doing. She eventually thought about going and putting a stall in a very, very busy mall. They didn't talk to me, they talked to some other people in the church. Those people also gave them some money to scale. Within 6 months, it was out of business. After a month after they paid for the mall,
I asked them, can I see the numbers? I looked at the numbers and said, this is not going to work. You haven't thought about this thing correctly. It was very, very quick for me to see that this was a model that was not going to work. But because they had a lot of emotion, a lot of passion, they went and talked to people who they thought would bless it. Not only did they talk to them, they borrowed money from them, and they lost everything. So it's very important that when you scale, that either you have the experience or you need to be able to talk to somebody and say, hey, I'm doing this. What are some things to think about? I told you I bought a company out of bankruptcy 5 years. The owner of that company works for me right now. He's 70 years old. I actually took my second son out of a different department. I put him to work with that guy. Even though he went bankrupt, I knew that there were so many things that he understood and experienced that I knew that God would actually help us. And he's running one of my most profitable business units today. He doesn't have children. He's got a young team, and I've surrounded him with a young team. I've given him all the tools he needs. And I'm telling you, he's doing a fantastic job at 70 years old. He told me, Sam, I want to work at least 5 more years. So it's just important that even when I bought their company out of bankruptcy, that I didn't let him go. I've kept him close. You know why? Because I don't know what I don't know. Simple, right? And not every answer is going to come from me. Guess what? Because he works for me, I'm here. I don't have to be there making sure everything is right because he works for me. I've seen value in him. So even though he may have made some mistakes, there are other places that he's extremely strong. And I have actually done this as I've grown. I have actually built a network of people around me. In court, I told the judge, I said, my network is bigger than my net worth. Because they kept asking me, because what happened in that case was, I was $240,000 short after doing everything I did. It was like a $5 million deal. After putting my house up again, putting all the money, the bank gave me some money. After all of that, I was $240,000 short. And the other side was trying to say, this guy is not going to have the money to be able to do it. I actually told the judge, I got myself on the stand, and I showed the judge over 3 years how much money I'd given away. Because I told her, listen, I live my life as a steward. A steward doesn't hoard resources. They give the resources away. And the moral, what happened in that story is a friend of mine went to the bank and brought $240,000 cashier's check and gave it to the bank, to the lady. She said, I can't take it now, it's just that he's going to need it for closing. And they put him on the stand and the judge asked, why would you do this? Without any collateral, no paperwork. They couldn't even put it in the business name, because if they put it in the business name, the banks wouldn't have allowed it, because then the position of the bank would have been compromised. And he said, I have one son. If something happens to me or my wife, Sam and wife are the guardians. If I can trust my son with him, why would I not trust with him with the money? Within 2 years, I was actually able to repay him that money. So it's important that you are constantly looking to see who God has God has put people around us who have resources, who have abilities, who have experience, and it's just important to make sure you're asking those questions. Number 10, this is the last one. Gratitude. Right? It's very, very important that we have a heart of gratitude, because entrepreneurship and stewardship is a team sport. It's one of the reasons I love cricket. And I learn a lot from cricket, because the truth of the matter is, when you play badminton, you play ping pong, you play golf, you play by yourself. But when you play a game like cricket, right, you're depending on other people. Their mistakes, their failures, their strengths. And it's just important for us to have a heart of gratitude, because I didn't get here. Remember I told you that I grew up in a house where profit was a bad word. So God had to actually prepare me with a lot of other mentors who taught me along the way, right? So now that I'm here, I haven't forgotten about that. I give credit to where credit is due, right? It's very, very important, because this is exactly how God is going to bless us, right? You know, he talks about the lepers, right? God, I think of 12, right? Only 2 came back, right? And said thank you. So it's just important for us to have a spirit of thanksgiving, because it is how entrepreneurship and stewardship works, because you always need other people. You cannot do this by yourself. So that's all I have. Any questions? What did I not cover? What did I not? Thank you. What did I not talk about? Anybody questions? Questions?
Anything that we do like successful first, second time making like a biryani, making successful. First time we make very well. Second time we might mess up with something else.
Yeah.
And that makes us very discouraged in the second stage of our life.
Yeah.
How do you come up like people that start a business and then fail it?
Very good question, right? So the question he asked is, he's using the example of biryani, but it can be used in anything. When you do something the first time, you do it really well, right?
Yes.
But then when you do it the second and third time, you start to make mistakes. There are ingredients missing. The curry doesn't taste the same, and you lose the market, right? So this is where documentation is very important, right? So if you think about a biryani, right? Let's use the biryani as a simple example. We're going to follow, we didn't maybe follow a recipe the first time, but it's important before we make it again to go back and capture the ingredients and say, here are the things that I did, right? It's the critical path. These are the things that I did. Here are the ingredients I put in. Here's how long I baked it. Here's how long I boiled it, right? So in manufacturing especially, which is my field, taking variability out of the process is very important, right? And the way that you take variability out of the process is sometimes to write it down, right? Process improvement, right? So you come up with a process. So for us, it's bills of material, it's putting routings together, it's thinking about the ingredients, not only what are the ingredients, in what measurement, right? So that you can create a repeatable process, because you cannot scale if you don't have a repeatable process. And when you're going from 50 or something, when you're cooking for 10 people to cooking for 100 people, that alone, there is some variability that is going to be introduced into your process. So you have to think about that correctly, right? So it comes back to right thinking. It's thinking about putting a process in place and following that process, right? So some people would say, just because something is creative, that you allow creativity to just go anywhere, right? So even with creativity, right, you need a good process. So brother, you can actually teach some fundamental. So one of the things you can say to them is, here are some fundamental things that I always want you to think about.